All right, so for those of us who are staying in track 3, which is GIS for Resilience, please make sure you're in the right track. Our next session is called Secure Information Sharing with SISE-net. And it's my pleasure to introduce Tom Moran. Tom, I guess you're up first to speak in this session.
Awesome. Partnering with me is Greg McShane from DHS. Greg, can you hear us?
Yep. Can you hear me?
All right. Okay. Yep. There you go. Awesome. So I'm gonna let me just get set for here real quick. So I've been looking forward to this session. One, I really enjoy working with Greg. Greg works with DHS SIS. I'll let him introduce himself. But my name's Tom Moran. I serve as the executive director for the All Hazards Consortium. I came out of the private sector, telecom space. I retired about 2003 and got involved with this, some like customer states at the time that were working on this multi-state thing as an idea. And they got a grant and so forth. So it led to the creation of the All Hazards Forum, started in 2004. And then went 5, 6, and 7. And then out of that in 2005 came the All Hazards Consortium. And so we did a lot of meetings at, workshops and white papers. Great. But everything changed in 2012 for us when Sandy hit. Sandy took us into the operational mode. And that was in the fall of 2012. And in 2013, the Fleet Response Working Group was born. And they wanted to get things done, and it really changed the way we work. And so part of our partnership is formed over the years with DHS. Greg's part of that. Greg, why don't you introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll jump into the information.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Greg McShane. I've been with CISA, Integrated Operations Division. That's the latest name for it as our result of our CISA 2020 reorg. I've been with the organization going on 15 years. Prior to that, I worked in the consulting arena, Booz Allen Management Analysis Incorporated, and prior to that with Potomac Electric Power Company for about 6, 7 years designing and building substations. So currently my role is working with a lot of IT system strategy, requirements, building out capability. It's basically what we need to do to implement cradle to grave for capability for our integrated operations So that's it, Tom. Back to you.
Great. So Greg and I are part of a pretty large group that meets every Friday, literally every Friday. And I forgot how long it's been going on, Greg. I know for me, probably 7 years.
Yeah, for me, about 3.
People say, what? How do you do that? And what happens? Yeah, I get a lot of funny questions. So I thought, just as a humor, I would show you. These are all the PowerPoint slides for last year. Now, why am I showing you that? Because what we're going to talk about here takes work. It just didn't come out of nowhere. It took governance. It took discussion. It took agreement. It took arguing. It took private conversation. It took a lot of cooks in that kitchen. But it all starts with the sensitive information sharing environment, right? How do we vet people? How do we vet and organize data in kind of a honeycomb so we protect? Every cell has data and people, and how do we protect that? And so we took the best of the best from Defense Industrial Base, had the best one to do it. When they do an F-15 or fighter pilot, whatever the latest one is, they probably have 300 to 400 companies working on that project, and they all have to speak. The brake people can't see the data from the finance people, and it's got to all be partitioned. So we worked with a partner, TSCP was their name, and they taught us how to do this. And so we dumbed it down to what we could use it. But what the SISE does, it creates a new place, a new approach to sharing sensitive information by use case. So it's not a pile of information, it's organized by use case. Well, one of the issues we ran into was we needed a way to take the SISE, which was kind of the data hub, and now organize all this data, over 2 million data points, into what are the 6 we need for damage assessment, right? What are the 12 we need for this? And so we've been building use cases through a process over the years. And Greg's been part of that. Greg has as well as a number of states and companies. And so you never want to pick a use case that not everybody can support or that's irrelevant. So we got a process of how to pick a use case. We got a process of how to develop a use case. Why do we use use case? Because use cases organize people and information towards an outcome, towards an action, right? It isn't a white paper necessarily. It can be, but it usually is a solution, a website, an app, a data set, a partnership. There's many different ways to spell solutions. Could be a software development project, what have you. But what is SISE-net? So SISE-net is really designed, in a second. SISE-net is a way to leverage the SISE community and its data to develop solutions that will help solve certain things. So SISE-net, the concept is, it is a connection between states and companies. In this case, we're going to talk about Virginia, EOC, and Dominion Energy Ops Center. There may be communications firms, fuel, others down the road, and DHS CISA on one problem, which is use case, focus on damage assessment first. So we get very small and focus everybody on this one use case. As you can, hopefully I'm sharing my screen. You can see my screen, I hope, right? Greg, you can see my screen, I hope.
Yeah, I can see it. We're good.
All right, very good. All right. So within this one use case, there may be multiple data sources. The SISE ranks that data, layers that data, so that when you come look at it, you know it's qualified and it is merging multiple data sources. So everybody has the highest fidelity of that use case, right? And this could be a number of either government or paid data services or, you know, screenshots or social media. It's a number of things, but it all is focused the data on one problem, which is damage assessment. It's a huge issue. So why is that important? Because what we've learned over the years is that not every data set has the total picture of things, right? You can look at an aerial photograph that tells you some things, but it doesn't tell you other things. Why is bringing the state EOC important? Well, when it hits the fan, the state EOC is the most reliable data source during a disaster because they centralize police, transportation, fire, EMS services. It all kind of goes through the EOC when we're in a damaged area. So the EOCs become the center point for this, and that's where we want to connect in. We've used a number of other services, paid services, but they're not as accurate, especially with around road closures. They're just not as accurate as the state EOC in a pinch, right? They're great, but when it really hits hard, we've heard from the utilities, you can't really rely on that. So it takes publicly available private data. And then now what we're seeing in this first damage assessment use case with our implementation of SISE-net, we're seeing data that just never gets being shared. This is sensitive operational information or competitively sensitive. Okay, we have some use cases where we got competitive companies that want to work together and share information so they can all benefit, but they don't want one company to see the other company's data. How do you do that? The SISE does that. So anyway, the layering approach to the SISE is really important. So as we get into this discussion today, SISE-net is simply leveraging the SISE to connect states, utilities, or other companies and into a specific use case of which we have developed dozens, probably over 100 actually, all different levels. And we're very excited about it because at the end of the day, we've been at this 16 years. And you can only have so many meetings and so many workshops talking about the problem. Eventually, you got to do something or your members just leave, okay? So the do from the SISE work group is what can we get? So what can we produce from that? Well, this was an idea that came up last year. What we had to do is earn the trust of the state and Dominion to do this with us, and we developed agreements, things like that. So it was really good. So I want to thank Stacy Neal at Virginia OEM and Alan Bradshaw at Dominion. They've been on calls with us every week. So after a while, it starts to build trust. So I just wanted in the first part of this is cover what is the SISE-net initiative. And over time, we look to add Pennsylvania, Alabama, maybe Florida. So we're going to work states that want to do this. And so you have to qualify for that, because it can't just, hey, we want to do it. How do we do it? There's a process that we go through to make sure that that everything fits and works, because we don't want to promise something we can't do. But Virginia uses the WebEOC platform. SISE is Esri based, but has hooks into WebEOC, and pretty much anything through our partner GeoCollaborate is a way we can bring other data in very quickly, regardless of platform. And I think Dominion uses Esri, if I'm not mistaken. And Greg, I think at a DHS, you guys are kind of an everything shop. You use pretty much.
Yeah, Esri, WebEOC, we've got a lot of different capabilities, even
Yeah.
leveraging Remedy, ServiceNow.
Yeah. So the first, yeah, no, I mean, you got more systems I've ever heard of, so I think it's great. So anyway, I'm going to pause. If you got questions about this, please put them in the chat or the questionnaire. So Greg, I'm going to turn to you just real quick. Maybe you could provide, CISA was the first to connect into the SISE, right? Can you talk about why did you guys want to do that, and what are some of the issues facing CISA that DHS that you see? This
Yeah, sure, Tom. And I think in the chat we got a request to use the slideshow button if you can do that.
Sure, yeah.
Good, yeah, but good question, Tom. And you know, first off, it's our connection to a lot of the private sector. All Hazards Consortium, along with its members and some of the other partners, really have been tackling this use case approach. It's what's the operational problem we're trying to solve, and identifying the right people, bringing them to the table, really clearly defining that problem set. You know, having that identifying the right data that's associated with the problem set and can feed that, and then also, you know, it's putting those right processes in place as well as the right technology. And you know, earlier we did the commercial routing application as a great example of a success story there. We had the right people, the right tool and technology at the time. I think the Esri hub just rolled out 4 months earlier. We were able to leverage that. National Governors Association, they put together a lot of the restriction data that's collected from all of their websites on their webpage, and it was structured format. Again, positives right there, and then we put the right processes together to effectively and efficiently leverage that tool and capability. So again, you know, some of the things we're really attracted by is you know, it's the protections. It's the restrictions. You know, we have a traffic light protocol for a lot of our reporting and capabilities we share. You know, it's a lot of that protected information, whether it's PCI, CVI, you know, still got to follow those processes. But one of the real benefactors of SISE was that it puts together a interactive capability, and that's something that we've always been striving for within CISA. It can't be just a static, you know, document or dashboard all the time. We need a capability we can show and present. And with some of the connections with GeoCollaborate, opening up those portals, not only during steady state, but also during response recovery efforts, gives you the capability to share that information in a secure environment and in an instant to help present and identify that picture and paint that picture of what that problem is, or you know, whether it's in a briefing or you know, in the field, those types of things. So with that, you know, it's
Greg, we lost your audio.
Can you hear me, Tom, now?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah. No, we lost it again. We'll give it just a minute. Okay, why don't I just go ahead here? I'll slip it in. Let me just change this real quick. We can move back here. Okay, Carrie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Tom.
Okay, good. I want to I want to make sure it wasn't our end, right? All right. I guess we'll have tech support watch back for Greg. All right. So just a couple things we wanted to cover. So why was this needed? Okay. Um, so when the fleet working group was started in January of 2013, in December, the first thing they wanted to do was they wanted to do an exercise. And the exercise was good. We didn't have SISE at all. We were just doing email and building trust like that. Well, in December 2013, major ice storm came through Oklahoma, Texas. And at the time, John Shaner was the chair of the fleet worker. John called me and says, Tom, I know we don't have our process defined really well, but what do you think? You want to test it for this snowstorm? I said, what do you mean? He said, we got crews from pretty much every state on the East Coast moving to Texas and Oklahoma. Let's test our process for fleet movement support. I said, okay, fine. So we lit up some emails and got phone calls scheduled, and we had 3 conference calls based on time zone, and John's microphone didn't work and he couldn't even talk during one of them. We sent out an email to all these states. We partnered with FEMA to get the right people in those states, and it was a Herculean effort. We think it worked, but here's what happened. That storm was moving eastward, right? And those emails got out of hand in the sharing front, and some of that data, we were telling people, hey, these trucks are coming. Here's the number of trucks, the number of FTEs. It was good information. We said for operation use only. We didn't want anybody to share it. We did the best we could. So we're really working on the honor system. Well, sure enough, that stuff got out there, and several of the states back on the East Coast saw that crews were leaving their state and headed west, and that storm was coming from the west to the east. So the natural question is, what the hell are those trucks leaving my state for when that storm's going to hit us in 2 days, right? Well, they just didn't, like I didn't, they didn't understand the electric sector's mutual assistance process, where crews would come from Canada or from the Southeast to fill in where that process was vacant. The mutual assistance process had been honed for decades. It's done on a voluntary basis, so the crews don't have to go. They do it all at cost, right? It's not free, but it's cost, part of the storm response. But we had issues, and in one case, we heard that one state sent a letter to the executive of a utility and complained. This is not good, okay? So that email, that fiasco in the fall of 2013 had us take pause. We actually stopped using email for that because we were gun shy now. The last thing we wanted to do was break the trust of the utilities that we were working with, number one. And, who do you trust? How do you prevent somebody? If I send all you an email, how do I know you wouldn't forward it out to somebody else, right? So, Greg, you're back. Welcome.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a connection issue.
That's okay.
It was not friendly. We have challenges with Zoom, but
that's okay.
Besides the point.
So I'll wrap this up, then we can get back to what you're saying. So anyway, bottom line, from really the fall of 2013 all the way into the fall of 2014, we tried as best we could without using email. Well, sure enough, we entered DHS Science and Technology approached us about a way to do sensitive information sharing using a PIV-I card. We said, okay, we got a project. We partnered with TSCP, who does this for 50 million people all over the world. And they taught us a lot. We owe a lot to TSCP because they provided the legal framework. They provided the policy and process. They do it for the DoD and the Defense Industrial Base. So why reinvent the wheel? Let's copy what they did. So we took their 40-page process, brought it down to 5 or 6. We simplified it. And we found out that was too hard because the states had to go get fingerprinted. They had to buy a PIV-I card. It was too hard. So we just took the process and re-engineered it. So the vetting can be done now without a digital card. Now we have technology to allow us to do that on a virtual basis. But what we got out of that project was a framework, a legal agreement, a data and user agreement, and that gave birth to the SISE work group, which is still there today. But it gave us the vision for the technical side of this, which is now improved with Esri and others, where we and GeoCollaborate, where we now have the technical process. So the SISE protects that information through a combination of governance, legal, policy, and process behind the curtain, where now that enabled the technology. That's how SISE-net happened, because now we've got the technology piece, but you don't build trust with technology. It takes weeks and months of planning and dialoguing and agreements, and you can even do agreements, but even Greg, I could you know, it's really people to people. Agreements don't protect privacy. It's just my personal opinion. But if I know Aaron Strickland, if I know Dave Vanderbloem, and if I know, you know, and they know me, then I know Greg, and now we start building this network. So anyway, Greg, welcome back. I didn't want to.
Yes. So let me know if I'm clear, because I still kind of coming in and out. It's maybe later in the afternoon.
No, you sound good.
All right, good. So I think we were talking about a lot of the use cases, and you know, even on the CISA side, you know, we have a lot of the S3 dashboards. We capture a lot of the, I call them macro use cases, whether it's a hurricane or a wildfire. The dashboards, the information that feeds into those dashboards. But where the AHC really comes into play is really diving into some of more of the micro level type use cases, such as damage assessments, pre-staging, fuel availability, fuel restoration, all those challenge use cases that they seem to be kind of repetitive every hurricane that we have to deal with, or a lot of the response recovery efforts, you know, to help us better prioritize restoration. You know, what do we need to do first? You know, what is it based off of, you know, the infrastructure or critical infrastructure in their area, or those specific, you know, supply chain type issues. You know, down in Puerto Rico during Maria, there was a lot of issues with, you know, IV bags, and there was one manufacturer in that area that was critical to the supply chain and providing those. So we really had to prioritize that as getting that back up online. So what are those dependencies and interdependencies in that specific area? You know, what's the damage assessment? What do we need to fix first? So, well, obviously, one, we need to get access. You know, we need to get fuel in there. We need to get the people in there to get it back up and running. So those types of issues we're always trying to tackle and really drive from a CISA level. We know that CISA is that highest level, but you know, at the end of the day, we know that the private sector and the local utilities and the states are going to be the ones that are actually solving those problems and fixing those issues. So, you know, back to some of the different data, you know, we use a lot of it for situational awareness. The SISE can really play, it feeds our dashboards through GeoCollaborate. Where we're really looking into is on the data side is how can we better effectively share those data sets so that we can feel, we really feed our modeling or forecasting tools that give you a better infrastructure outlook of what's happening. How long can a building be sustained, or a critical infrastructure be sustained off of how much fuel? Those types of things in forecasting. It's a lot of those types of capabilities we bring to the table that is really not done at the state or the local levels as one unit looking at it as a whole. So again, where SISE is really valuable to us is that it does provide that utility information and data that other utility, those connections to the state. You know, those are things that are really, really challenging and sharing of that information. You know, we get into some of the protections and what are the advantages of sharing it within the SISE versus somewhere like HISN. Well, you share it with HISN, guess what? That information is foilable. You know, so the Freedom of Information Act, you know, that kind of information can be accessed by the public if they request that. So.
Yeah, Greg, let me pull that thread. Let me pull that thread just for a second. I did not mention that. I'm glad you brought it. FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. It's a big issue for states and private sector. And we didn't really talk about it a lot, but in Maryland, and I'm sure it's probably that way with other 501c3s. In Maryland, a 501c3 is exempt from FOIA requests. And we used to get a lot of them. They were the media, they were competitors, whatever. We don't even answer them anymore, right? Because we're exempt from that. We're not exempt from criminal investigation. So we're not hiding behind a curtain. But legally, we're exempt from FOIA. We didn't realize that's a big deal, right? And especially to the states, because like Greg's for government, if I send Greg an email, if he opens it, if he gets it in his system, it's FOIAble, right? So within the SISE, it's covered because the SISE is operated underneath the consortium 501c3. And that's a big thing. And that's part of the privacy governance structure. So Greg, thanks for mentioning that. I wanted to make sure I hold that thread a little bit because a lot of it's all part of the building blocks of the trust, right?
Yeah. I don't know, Tom, you know, one real benefit also is the work that we're doing with the SISE on the operational readiness level. It's measuring that data quality, that data confidence. You know, this is not in the business of actually measuring that data. You know, we don't rank it. We actually, you know, we'll create that CISA data catalog, which gives you a good description of what that data is, the owner of that data, and you know, things of which are important to us. How's it collected? How's it protected? You know, the data handling, those types of things. But we're not in the business of ranking data. So where the ORL and the SISE really helps us in is actually how good is that data? Is it an authoritative data source we can leverage and use things like and when I say that, it's more the data sets, but we're actually measuring data that comes from NOAA, that comes from the National Governors Association, and you know, ranking that data. How often is it updated? Those types of things that go into the actual ranking are very helpful for us.
Yeah. So Kim McCall asked a question. You know, would you be able to walk through a quick use case for something like pandemics, right? So I put on the screen. Let me just back up one. The ones, a few. We had 18 that came out of the 2020 with COVID. But we put a few of them up there where we actually produced solutions, right? It was very rapid pace. Also in the chat, I put a link to a YouTube video on how we develop a use case. All a use cases is a problem, right? And Greg, we laugh at this, right? We got a list of problems to work on. So the group's got to pick, all right, which one are we going to focus on? So there's a process for that. And once we pick one, we use the use case process to get everybody focused to get common agreement on what is the problem, right? What's the impact? And we like to get every sector involved. So everybody hears the food sector say, hey, I didn't realize that I was dependent on that, right? Every sector gets to chime in on that. Then we look at the people involved to make decisions. Then we look at the data sensitivity. And the last step, number 6, is how the solution. And that's where we start looking for other partners that have developed software, that have developed an app we don't know about, that have a website, that have a data set. We don't want to produce any solutions. They're already out there if you look for them, right? What happens too often is people get a grant, they go develop a solution. There's 15 of them there already. Or one's been developed 5 years ago, no one knew anything about, right? So we try to look before we leap. But anyway, that video that is in the chat will show you kind of the process we use. And it's pretty dynamic, right? Maybe you can just address how quickly things can happen when you got a trusted group working together on a use case.
Yeah, Tom. So again, you know, the whole use case approach is, again, we need the right people at the table. If we're talking lodging, and you know, you have people from, a different sector, you know, talking to lodging that are not familiar with it. I mean, they'll have some input, but they're not the experts. So we need to actually, have those right people at the table. So I mean, so many times have we put like these use cases in the parking lot, just take a step back and really, what are we trying to solve? Defining that problem set, and until you can actually get to a clear direction or you're moving into, you got to have that flexibility to kind of adjust as needed. But then you can start addressing, you know, is there data associated with this lodging? And then, of course, there's always data out there, but is it structured? Can it feed what you need to? Does it answer the problem set that you're trying to that you're trying to solve? You know, and can you identify, you know, that right technology that can help you? Is it a geospatial capability you're looking for? Is it something else? Those types of things are extremely beneficial or ingredients to a recipe to success in solving that problem. And then obviously the right processes in place to feed the information into the tool set help solve that problem and answer that question.
Greg, one of the things I was going to ask you about is when there's a trusted governance structure around a group working issues, how quickly things can come together. It takes a few minutes, takes a few meetings to understand the culture, but you know, once you're part of it, things happen very quickly. And Greg, I thought maybe you could, just for the group that may not have heard it, you just tell the story behind the CRA app. Is a great application during COVID, right? Massive issues with transportation. Commerce was grounding to a halt because of all the state policies that were being enacted every hour. You know, drivers were afraid to drive. They didn't want to get fined or penalty or just pull over. It was a nightmare. And Greg, maybe you can talk about how that use case kind of came out of nowhere, how quickly things happen and what ended up happening in the end. Maybe
yeah, sure. And that's actually, you know, I addressed a little earlier. I mentioned to it a commercial routing application, and this was something related to COVID. And you know, you know, we were in this very unique environment, not knowing what was coming up on us. We saw a lot of, let's say, you know, I'm gonna pull up my notes here. I talked to this earlier today, so let me pull those up for a second here. And
while Greg's pulling it up, let me guys take you back to a Friday call. We had 3 states on. We had a bunch of utilities, telecom, fuel, food, a bunch of them, and the issue came up as, hey, Greg brought it up. He said, hey, our director wants to know what we can do to accelerate commerce. Trucks aren't moving, sales aren't happening, revenue's down. We got to fix this. Okay. And it was like, I mean, that was that was it, right? And so everybody's listening on this call.
It's great. It was great. It was like the states started implementing these travel restrictions. You know, stay at home, school, or you know, everybody's just trying to get their head around. You know, what the companies and organizations are just trying to. You know, what do we need to do to deal with this right now? So the ask from the CISA director was like, hey, we need to minimize the threat or impact to the supply chain. So our deputy associate director from CISA Central, our operations group, you know, just came to the table and said, hey, you know, look, can we put an application or an app or a tool together that can really identify the most effective or least restrictive travel route from state to state? Very similar to a pilot doing their pre-flight type planning. And I mean, that was just so much in the AHE strike zone, because they did a lot of the fleet response working group dealing with those types of same issues. And, you know, we defined that problem set. We already pretty much had it, and that was the request. And then we we started the data collection on it. We actually had taskers going out to our regional offices to really pull all the information from the state websites on the travel restrictions, and then put it in a spreadsheet and send it to the headquarters. And it was just very clumsy, awkward way of doing it. So, you know, we had about a week to do it. And while we were putting the tool together, NGA, National Governors Association, actually started collecting all that same information that every other organization throughout the United States was collecting and put it on their website. And it was structured information. And it was so funny and unique that ESRI just rolled out a new ESRI Hub capability 4 months earlier. We were able to leverage that, able to leverage the AAC, Idaho National Labs, for creating this app. And we were able to feed it. And it's just, it's basically you going from point A to point B. What's the most effective and least restrictive, however you want to do it, on your parameters or inputs, going from state to state. Whether during that COVID time, I actually had to go from DC to New York City and do some. My mom is up in New York City, so we had to go see her. So getting in the car, I hadn't gotten in the car in 2 months. Where do I stop? Where do I get gas? You know, is this rest stop even open? You know, those types of questions were going through my head. And then even, can I actually travel through New Jersey? Can I get into New York City? What do I need to do if I get into New York City? So that answered a lot of my questions, and I was able to use it. It's really geared towards the trucking industry. I call it transportation planners, logistic professionals, and drivers traveling from point A to point B. That may find it confusing and difficult to select and navigate transportation routes and know which
states have what restrictions in place. So that's it in a nutshell. It gets into a lot of the detail from state commercial driver's license, commercial weight, vehicle weight, hours of service restrictions, essential employee access, reentry for state restrictions. The list goes on and on. So it's a fantastic story to tell, and very proud of it. And it was almost like the perfect storm, or the moons were aligned for it. But we did it, and we did it in a couple of weeks.
So I'm sharing what we do often on our Friday call. This is our napkin drawing, right? Can you see it? Okay.
Yep.
So this is the napkin drawing for the SISE-net framework. We do one of these for every use case we got. And it's real fast, and everybody comments and so forth. And then they develop from there. So using the process, it's all really about the process. Using the process, SISE-net started as a drawing. Hey, what about this concept? I remember Dave Vanderblom was on as an attending. Dave was able to provide feedback to us. Greg gave us federal input. We had several states on. Keep it simple. Don't make it, so we came up with the drawing. Then the next week we looked at the legal. The next week we looked at the technical. But by the time we were it done, it was about I think it took us about a year for SISE-net to evolve because of the technology. But what Greg just talked about, the CRA app, was 10 days. We had a prototype in 10 days. Shout out to Idaho National Labs and CISA. They provided the people and the resource, like the thing just came out of the ground. SISE-net has taken a lot longer, only because we didn't have the Esri hub, which we do now. We had the policy and the process like that, but we also didn't have Dominion, Alan Bradshaw, and Virginia Stacy Neal that agreed to do that. And so working together with staff, they said, all right, we'll give it a shot. And the barter was equally beneficial. Virginia really wanted to see that, and Dominion wanted to see that. And now telecom companies want to get involved because they want to know where the power is going to be out, and they're willing to share their cell phone tower outage data, which never gets shared, but the SISE will protect that. So now you can see we're adding other layers, which will just make everything a little faster so that everybody's looking at the same stuff at the same instant, right? By use case. That's the whole point. Greg, you had a comment?
Yeah. So Tom, one of the areas we're really in our emergency response operations, it's all the emergency support functions under FEMA. We are ESF number 2, which is all the communications, and we also are ESF 14, which is relatively new. It's all the sector, cross-sector dependency and interdependency. And ESF 14, again, relatively new. So we're looking in definitely building additional capability on that, whether it's our dependency or interdependency type tools, our tools we use for our modeling, all the cascading effects of something that might be happening. And again, part of where SISE can really play, or handily is in that, and accessing information and data from the private sector and being shared in one place in a protected environment. And we do have folks, our protective security advisors and our cyber security advisors. We do those types of assessments in the field, and we have those hosted in our CISA gateway. But a lot of times we don't have key information that's relatively real. It's dynamic type information, the real time type information that can get fed into SISE.
Yeah. So Greg, let me ask a couple other questions. What are I know at the state level some of the challenges they have with sharing information? Certainly, your FOIA, there's policy, there's process, a lot of different things. And I know at DHS it's no different, right? You're a big organization. You've got a lot of irons in the fire. I remember, as an example, when the CRA app was developed, it was developed very quickly. 10-day, we got a prototype. A week later, we had been through operational testing. We get feedback. made the adjustments, ready to go. And then I think, if I remember right, it took us about 2 weeks to go through the legal, public relations process. Okay, which was new to us, but it was a great experience because we got a chance to learn. That's why DHS has to be careful. We didn't realize all the risk to them to put out information, right? It was very educational. Anyway, Greg, I just wanted to see if we just talk to that for a minute, because it isn't just DHS can get something and push it out. It has to go through a process for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And I think,
So,
it'd be very helpful for the group to hear that.
yeah, so really two parts to that, and first is privacy issues. We had to route it through our privacy and get approvals through that, which was fairly easy. We wrote a privacy impact assessment. We weren't really collecting any PII or things of that nature. And anytime you are collecting any kind of data, it triggers a Paperwork Reduction Act review as well. So we have to go through those two elements, and we actually pulled back from actually collecting email addresses. So we made it, the CRA open to the public, so everybody could use it. And we pulled back from that and didn't want to put it in a restricted environment such as SISE-net. So it was open to everybody. So at some point, maybe we would pull it back into SISE-net. If we were to do that, we would go back into the PRA review, because anytime you put anything up into the public, there's going to be most folks using it for a good cause, but there are always those bad actors that are going to use it for a bad cause.
Yeah, and we in the private sector, we were not aware. Why are they so slow? Why it takes so long? We were not aware of. They just didn't come up with this to come up with. There's reasons for that, right? And there's risk to DHS, and so we wanted to be respectful of that, right? It's part of the trust building process. You got to understand it, then you can. Oh, okay, I got you. And so one of the things that we did was we were taking notes during that process, because this won't be the first rapid solution being developed. So the next time around, we will understand, and we'll integrate our process as we develop SISE-net, right? We will be respectful of those processes, both at a utility or a state or DHS, because it is important. And in the end, SISE-net, the beauty about SISE-net is if you are the data provider, you get to determine who sees your information, for how long, and for what purpose. Those are the three questions we ask, right? Who's going to look at it? Can I get it and forward it? No, right? We have 3 levels of use cases in the SISE. The first is just kind of straight vetting, where we vet you 4 or 5 different ways: cell phone, email, and questionnaire, and like that, an agreement. Level 2 involves a credential and an agreement, right? Zero tolerance, you violate it, you're out. And then level 3 use cases involve a penalty, like 10 grand an occurrence. We took that from the Defense Industrial Base. So, but level 3 is another agreement. We're not there yet, but level 3 involves probably not secret information, but maybe very sensitive information, right? So we haven't done any level 2 or 3 use cases now. SISE-net will probably end up being a level 2. But the reason I bring that up is there's many different reasons for that on the federal, state, local, and commercial side. But the nice thing about SISE is most people come into it will be a consumer of the data first. Nobody just jumps in and starts sharing data. It's like dating, right? You got to go through a few days before there's trust. It's no different. There's humans involved, right? As my father used to say. So you have to be very respectful of that. But once that thing clicks in their head, oh, okay, I see how this works. It becomes a barter, and it really is amazing. So there's more data out there than you can imagine. So I think it was important, Greg, we touched on that, because people jump right to the technology, and they jump right past the people and the trust. And at the end of the day, it's the trust that has to happen. And on the state side, every state is different. Some jump right on something, and some are just, hey, we just, we don't ever share information with anybody outside of the state EOC. I know that for a fact. So it's state by state, and we had to make the case, the value proposition for everybody. Just like, why are we going to do this? Well, here's the value, here's the return on that exchange, if you will, which is very important. And Greg, maybe you can take a minute and just talk about some of, like, we talked about this before, maybe some of the data initiatives that you see in the future on DHS, and how SISE-net might inform or help those down the road from your perspective.
So Tom, I'm on the data council for CISA, and a lot of the things we're working towards is creating that CISA catalog of basically doing our inventory. We're doing it at a very high level now, bringing it back to the forefront. A lot of this stuff a lot of the data already exists. We just need to, put it in one place. We're leveraging a tool called Calibra. I think DHS headquarters is actually using that as well. So we'll have a place one-stop shop where we can get information on specific data. It'll have a data description, how the data is collected, who's using it, what's the data handling on it, and the data owner, which is very key, and any other restrictions on that data, whether it might be like licensing or things of that nature, things that can be shared, things that can't be shared, but where that may exist. So we're doing that at the, not only the CISA front office level, but also the division levels, and getting into a lot of the metadata, which is the data within the data sets, in creating or updating those data dictionaries with those specific fields of that. It'll all be name compliant, which is fantastic when it comes to data sharing. And there's a lot of things on the table right now. I'm really pushing the use cases approach to solving problems. You can't eat the whole apple. You got to take little bites at a time, and identify what are those top priorities of those problems that you're trying to solve. And we're getting into not only the physical parts of it, the cyber parts of it, and the National Risk Management Center approach to this, in the national critical functions, and identifying or filling in a lot of those, or identifying and then filling in those data gaps that exist that are needed for NRMC to run their forecasting and modeling.
Excellent. I don't think we have any more questions. We're coming right up on a break. We hope this information was helpful. There'll be a lot more coming out, so stay tuned. Our next session will begin at 4 o'clock. And on this one, we're going to have Chris Vaughn from FEMA is going to talk about FEMA's GIS initiative, which are really helpful. Again, if you want to change tracks, you can go to ahc2021.com, ahc2021.com, and we'll take a break here. We'll see you back at 4 o'clock.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.